Audentes Fortuna fucking hear that. Jesus, we're only supposed to deliver a message to Trotsky. The most adventure I was expecting was a fuck or two. Speaking of two fucks, hello all. I'm Tom, and it's the start of the fourth penultimate pod of this round of gaming shows over Encumbered. Back in this week, jumping some chaos, as due to a mass extinction event caused by the heatwave or some other people not being able to fucking keep to their schedules, and we've had to switch things up and bring our final pod to the fore in discussing a topic dear to PJ and my hearts, character development in RPG and gaming in general, and fucking hell, it is hot. Most of you will not be watching on YouTube, but I'm wearing a basketball vest because of how hot it is. I'm adding alcohol to the mix as well. It is probably not the best thing in the world, but all of my portable fans are all upstairs servicing the female, my toddler, a mile and a half. What can I do except bear it out?
I think you're working that arm look, if I can say so myself. Anyone lucky, the 7 people watching this on YouTube tomorrow, I think will be very, very fortunate to see those guns out. But yeah, it has been extremely hot. I'm lucky that up here in Sheffield, our heat wave ended this morning, so it's a positively mild 24 degrees kind of now. So back to beer drinking weather. I didn't actually drink yesterday because I think dehydration. I didn't actually drink yesterday. Like implies I drink every single day. But
if it's below 30 degrees, it's open. The can is fucking open.
Did not. Because it was water or bust. It was just I ended up staying up till 1 a.m. play just gaming generally. It was all I could do, and I was grateful that I was still playing kind of Baldur's Gate rather than something like Elden Ring, where I have in the past fallen foul of this sweaty controller during the heat waves, which is one of the worst things that can happen to anyone.
Yeah, no one likes those sweaty palms, do they? Really, especially when you pick up the controller after you've walked away for a bit, maybe gone for a pee, washed your hands, come back, and you're like, oh, it's all like it's all stickly and awful. Anyway, socials, just for if anyone cares, over on Musk Shit Show, 0v_encumbered. Over kind of pod on Bluesky. It's the same on YouTube if for some reason you want to watch us rather than listen to us, and on TikTok as well. Joined today by no one, as I mentioned earlier on. None of them can be asked to show up. Okay, there's some sort of family emergency or whatever. But hey, it makes more sense in the context of this pod to kind of characterize them as lazy ass gamers. Anyway, so at the moment, PJ, you're back into Baldur's Gate, are you? And kind of your interim game, playing your 5 million. Is it a new save again, or is it?
I actually checked. It is new. I checked my hours. Do you want to take a guess of my hour count on Baldur's Gate?
Christ, how many did Chef have on Cyberpunk? Was it about kind of 500, 600? Was it more?
I think it was about 500. It's not quite much. I've just ticked over the 450 hour mark.
Bloody hell!
Which is now gone past the Witcher 3, which was my previous most hours spent on a single game. So yeah, which is when I thought of it kind of slightly mad, but I still just get a lot of value from, and it is relaxing. It's like that. So it's no different to me than when you talk about like Slave Aspire, or what Bellatro will probably be like kind of a few months kind of down the line, where you just think, oh, I'll just kind of dip into it. But talk about Baldur's Gate, you dip in, you're like, oh, I'll just do a little bit more. But it's not stressful in a way that like if you try and replay something like Elden Ring or Red Dead or lots of it, there's so much difficulty, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, there's so much difficulty built into that. Once you know the mechanics of Baldur's, it's just like kind of sleepwalking. It's just like kind of watching your favorite movie over and over, but with a different end every time, which is kind of I think what draws me to it, really.
Fair enough. Like playing an autopilot a little bit when you aren't really in the same way that I'll default to a fairly sort of light touch indie game after having played something a bit intense, as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. I can get that. I've just never, apart from if it's a roguelike, I've never really had that sort of real draw to play a game again, no matter how much I've loved it. Honestly,
you don't. I don't think you've ever played a game 3 times. I think you've had a few that you've done twice, but even on the second run, you tend to lose interest.
Fallout 4, maybe, like when I got the Xbox Series X, then I was like, oh, I'll give this a go because I absolutely love that game. And I don't think I've done the Brotherhood of Steel ending, which we'll talk about endings later on, of course. And I think that was probably one of the very, very few games that I've played through kind of in terms of value. Like, I feel like if I, for example, I love The Witcher, or Witcher 3 that is, but I feel like if I started playing it again, I'd get that feeling of, when you're really excited to rewatch something potentially. So I don't really watch it. I don't watch films at all. But I love like kind of Star Trek. So Star Trek Deep Space Nine, for example, I've rewatched that about kind of 2 or 3 times. But if I try to watch that now, like, I'm listening to a podcast that they kind of go through it again, kind of the rewatch podcast. And like I was thinking, oh yeah, I'd really love to go and watch, the Way of the Warrior again, which is when Worf comes into Deep Space Nine. The problem is, if I did start watching that, I remember every single beat of that story. It would all be laid out before me very, very quickly. I couldn't tell you it right now, but if I got that kind of memory jog, that prompt of what the game was, I get it really quickly. Is that when I tried to play Dragon Age Inquisition again, when we had a bit of a fallow period a little while ago? Like, I started it, and I was just like, I remember this all really, really clearly, despite the fact I haven't played it for 7, 8 years. So I know somewhere, PJ, something in there stays.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and I obviously do remember huge chunks of it. Obviously, it does help. The majority of games I replay do have multiple kind of ways that you can complete them, and different kind of character builds, etc. But still, 75% of the content is probably identical. So I get that. I think I just kind of quite like the kind of familiarity of it. But it's only with very few games. Like I said, it's only really The Witcher 3, Baldur's Gate, and then those are the only games I've played more than twice, I think. So it's rare that a game really gets me that much. But what about you? Are you still on Claire Obscura?
I am, yeah. So I'm just finished. Did Visages, did Siren last night, which was actually a much easier fight than I thought it would be. They were saying that one was going to be the hardest of the two, and it was actually a lot easier than the Visages. I was just about to I'm sorry for any spoilers, but at the monolith, I got pulled through a portal. That's not really much of a spoiler. I was just kind of heading up.
The monolith area is long as well. It's probably the longest single level of the game.
I started doing that, and then my daughter started crying, and I had to go up and see her. So I was similar to you, kind of just staying up and playing gaming last night, and then because it was so hot, it took me ages to settle her, and then by the time she'd settled, it was like kind of getting on with the quarter to 1 sort of thing, and I was just like, well, I'm just going to go and turn everything off, turn all the lights off, and go to bed now. There's no way, so I had to kind of abandon. I was hoping to have kind of gotten to the crescendo of that particular part of the game before we came on tonight to talk about parrying and blocking, but hey, here we are instead talking about the thing, I guess, that maybe, I don't know, maybe it does kind of suit us actually to be talking about just the two of us, because it is the thing that maybe we appreciate the most. I know that Nima quite likes it, I know Paddy quite likes it, I know Dale quite likes it, but I feel like this is the thing that we particularly, nerd out about the most in terms of kind of the more.
Yeah, I think definitely. And as we get into it, I think we're the only people of our little kind of group who are happy to play narrative only games. I think everyone has an appreciation for a good story when it's paired with those other factors. But we're happily sit there and play a 30-hour game like Pentiment, which is just reading and wandering around solving the most basic of kind of whodunit kind of puzzles, and we love that kind of game. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody else I know, really. So, but yeah, it was great.
One that you recommended me during a few years ago when you were like some sort of animal. That was really flipping good.
Beacon Heights,
Beacon Pines, I think it was called, wasn't it?
That was great. Yeah,
bloody awesome. Like, I feel like a lot of those games you'll never play unless someone sort of gets you into it. Like Pentiment, especially, was just one of those, and also to some extent Procession to Cavalry, which is a very, very strange game. But those sorts of games are the only games that you kind of get into if someone recommends you them. I find a lot more. Was it Before Dawn or Before Dusk or something like that as well?
As Dusk Falls.
Dusk Falls. That was it. We played. Yeah, that was really good as well. Those games are so rare. But I think that, just pure narrative without any sort of action. Okay, a bit of quick time here and there. But I mean, without action at all, I think that definitely is a turn off for a lot of people. But I suppose this week is about kind of touching on that. The So there's kind of three key elements to this, which are all kind of interrelated, of course. So each week spoken about a particular game mechanic. So, we have an interesting discussion about the aspect of gaming, bring those different games into the chat. And in the change to schedule, we're all in on character development and gaming, taking in narrative storytelling, how that sort of unfolds throughout games, what we like, what we don't like, and then kind of the nuts and bolts really in terms of leveling and skill trees. And we've kind of spoken about this a little bit in the combat the classes pod last week, and also spoken about this a fair bit on the Encumbered pod, the very, very first one, because a lot of that was, of course, linked to strength. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like this one is much more in our wheelhouse than the other show we were planning before the Rats abandoned ship. We'll get back to gunplay and defensive stuff for the final one next week. Yeah, this is definitely the episode for us, isn't it? So I suppose let's start with narratives. I think we've started going down that particular road anyway. As a start of a 10, PJ, gaming like a film, but better if they know the story? ? Discuss.
Yeah, I think so. Having been someone who returned to gaming after a kind of decade or so in the wilderness, it was actually the thing I was most struck by. Not the graphics, which obviously improved all mechanics of modern gaming.
Yeah.
But actually the writing, that was the thing that really surprised me, having not kind of gamed for 15 years and kind of stepping back into those shoes, was like, oh my God, this writing, is equal of many, not just films, but of many books that I've kind of read kind of in my life, when it's right. And I think there's two main examples of narrative driven games, which you already touched upon. One is more the RPG setting where we have control over lots of other functionality like combat and mechanics, which we'll come on to, and like I said, touched upon last week. And then there are pure story games. So we've already mentioned the likes of Dusk Falls, Pentiment, which we both loved, and a dense, almost kind of common novel of a game. In terms of being better than a film, I think the example I always like, I don't think you've actually played it, is What Remains of Edith Finch. No. Mainly because it's only 2 hours long. So it's literally like watching a movie, and it's better than 99% of them. It's just that every aspect of it is so well crafted and thought out. There's zero wastage. It's the exact opposite of any Ubisoft game, basically. So that was a game I would definitely kind of recommend to you, because that's a game I do recommend to people and say, instead of watching a movie, sit down, just play What Remains of Edith Finch for an evening and just give it a try and treat it as if you were playing a movie, but almost like one of those, kind of, I know the likes
choose your own adventure sort of thing.
Yeah, dark. Sorry, Black Mirror have tried it, but it's not. This is much better. Normally, games like Pentiment we spoke about, it's like 25, 30 hours long. It's a big commitment for people to do that. Whereas Edith Finch isn't. It's a 2-hour commitment, and it's just, you just have to kind of play it to believe it. You just go because it's not just like one really simple story either. There's actually quite a lot of gaming in there as well, in the kind of various levels. It's just like a really brisk, fast-paced. I think if you've never gamed before, you'd probably struggle with it. But anyone like you with a knowledge of how gaming works, because it pulls in 3 or 4 different kind of genres, there is one slight horror section which you might struggle with. Just work through it. It's probably only 20 minutes long. So
20 minutes like that. So I'm not too bad with it. I think if it's outright horror, then I can be a little bit sort of like, oh God, this is awful. I'll earmark this for a Monday afternoon when the girls are out at Tumble and Bounce or something. Just play through it then when it's all light outside. I think there's a big if with narrative games though. Well, is that if it doesn't work, you feel trapped. You're wandering around in a narrative you have no control of and no interest, which with the other side that I was mentioning in terms of where there's RPG functionality and combat functionality, you've got a degree of kind of other ways you can go down, even if the story's a bit crap. Oh, the combat's good, or the mechanics are kind of really good, so I'm on board with it. Whereas when it's just a story game, like some of those Tell Me Why games, where I'm just like, I can't have another 10 hours of just doing, the only button I get to press is to, a quick time psychic link every hour, and the story is an absolute dirge. So I think the narrative is the hardest aspect of gaming to get right, but when it does get right, it's probably my favorite aspect, I think I'd say, in summary. Yeah, definitely. I think to add to the two things you mentioned, you can also buy into the world, and just find the world really fascinating. So thinking of the Bethesda sort of offering outside of Starfield, obviously, which was a steaming pile of crap, those worlds the first time you played them, especially when they were new, fresh, and really interesting. So we're talking about 2010, 2011 here, for Fallout 3 and Skyrim 2007, wasn't it? And Oblivion, obviously, we've recently kind of rediscovered it in Fallout 4. Like, it was just like the world had so many things to do and so many different parts of it, which were really kind of fascinating. And you were kind of wondering, even though they weren't sort of native cities, which probably would have added a bit more to it. There was still lots to kind of see and discover, and lots of different. There was nothing like, if you're in Fallout 4, for example, like discovering a random museum and you're kind of battling through it, and hey, at the end you found sort of Lincoln's repeater or something, like a particular rifle which has a particular kind of massive buff, and you've just kind of stumbled upon that, and that's excellent. And then you kind of 3 or 4 years later find that that's in all of like the guides for newbies when you're playing. I found that by mistake. That's great.
But Starfield's problem was it was fundamentally too big. I actually didn't mind the main story of Starfield. I thought it was quite good, decent story. If that game had just been almost Fallout 4 in size, it would have been miles better. But they made it an absolute behemoth of a game, but then they didn't fill in any of the detail. So you were wandering around, like you say, for nothing. Whereas, the beauty of the Fallout games was that you could explore the whole map. And Baldur's Gate is the same for this. You could explore every nook and cranny, and it's all meaningful. Everything will give you something that will either enrich the world narratively or make things better from a combat or kind of mechanic kind of perspective. So there's no wastage in it.
Yeah,
and that's always the key. It's like less is more. You can make big games, but I mean, I'm not a game developer, but so I don't know how the kind of. I have no concept of how difficult it is to kind of create that kind of organic kind of world that kind of evolves around you in a way that some games are obviously kind of capable of. But Starfield was not even close to that. I felt it was a step back from Skyrim, really, which was already flawed.
Yeah, it was the greatest sort of tree map that ever existed, I think, Starfield, because obviously you weren't flying between planets. You were just going from instance A to instance B to instance C to instance D to instance E, like just kind of floating through different sort of little mini worlds a lot of the time. And it just felt, the more you looked at it, the more that you were just kind of going, the Takeshi's Castle thing where you're people are kind of busting through different doors to try to get to the next stage and to the next stage to the next stage.
Yeah,
it felt very much like that. A lot.
But it wasn't fun, the travel. That's a rarity. Yeah. Kingdom Come Deliverance was great. It's great for that. But traveling is fun because there's an element of risk to the fast traveling for a start, which I like, and the fact that you just get the little him walking along. So it's not a black screen wake up, which is invariably what it kind of often is. And there's a lot of incentive for you not to. You could play the whole of Kingdom Come without fast traveling once, because it's not too big that you could do that if you wanted to. So I like that, and that can be kind of tied into the narrative. God of War, we know, does it very, very well as we mentioned in previous pods. But yeah, Starfield, a disaster. But anyway, I think we say that every week and in some various ways. So we've got it out of the way early this week.
Yeah, I mean, the only sort of also rejoin the defense you can possibly give Bethesda is kind of the reason why the loading screens are in there is because the way they design their games is that if you've messed with something in any environment, the game retains that and it's always there how you've left it. So White Run, if Breeze Home is full of cheese wheels, it will remember that. Whereas I think in KCD, I don't know if I'm wrong, but remember if you've taken something, but if you leave stuff kind of on the floor, I don't think it remembered if you came back to it. Like if you have dropped if you store something in chests, yeah. But if I dropped my my Milanese cuirass on the floor of the blacksmith's hut, I don't think it would be there when I got back. In fact, I think the blacksmith would have picked it up, which is
I think I think it had an expiry as well. I think it was like 48 hours or something, in-game hours or something, where it would have, like you say, I used to love it, like in Skyrim, you'd go back to that first village at the very beginning because you just happened to be in the area. It's like, oh, look, there's all the shit that I just dumped on the floor still there that the shopkeeper is avoiding every single time in an NPC loop. So I appreciate that, but also in 2024, you don't want loading screens when you're going through a building. It's just it breaks all immersion. So
Definitely does. No, but I think immersion is the key word, really. And I'm not a film guy in the slightest, really. I don't know whether it's attention span. I don't know whether it's just the fact that I've been shaped by playing games my entire life, pretty much. But I really want to lean in. I want to be actively involved, even when it comes, as you kind of mentioned earlier, with the games like Pentiment, the games, the games like Beacon Pines, where you are kind of involved to some extent, but just kind of also watching a brilliantly written fable unfold in front of you. And gaming is always that. And if I'm woven a good story, which has always led me down the road of loving RPGs, despite starting out as many people do on your FIFAs, your football managers, your time splitters. Once you get into sort of the narratively driven games, if you're that way inclined, especially, that's what kind of, I guess, keeps me hooked in and keeps me coming back, because I'm like, well, what's the story of this going to be? That's really awesome. In the way that, when you see a film trailer or you see a film sort of, poster, even, you're like, oh, that could be really interesting if they tell that story well. With gaming, it's even more so. Like a game like Crimson Dawn, which came out really kind of later on this year. You look at a few of the trailer videos and think, oh, that could be cool, but then you kind of know that you're in for hopefully a treat. Like the gamble is that you're in for a treat, and with the vast majority of games that I've played that have come to my attention or across my desk, once I've started playing them, there's been some element of it that I could hook on to, even if the game itself wasn't the best. I think like South of Midnight I played recently was a solid B, but there were certain elements of it that I really enjoyed. In terms of story development, then, to go here first, what choices do you think work best in that? What ways do you think kind of the developers or the writers could tell the story which have really sort of worked for you?
I think it's less about a kind of particular kind of choice and just that it has to be kind of meaningful. So not a range of options saying the same thing, but decisions that actually impact the world around you. So too many games give you the illusion of choice, and I think you need to either pick a lane. You either trust your narrative and make me a part of it, or you kind of let me write my own, or let me feel that I'm kind of writing my own. There's nothing worse than being trapped in a story you don't like, but then you can't even amend it or tweak to your skill set or interest. That's when I'm going to bail. That's when I'm like, okay, look, I'm not interested in this, and I can't even do anything kind of around the edges to kind of affect it. I'm just kind of trapped as a passenger within it, and that's the entire point of the class system that we spoke about last week as well, is to make people play how they want to play within a game. You're giving people that, so it's not doesn't always just have to be kind of narrative based. It can also obviously be kind of combat and mechanic based, where you're saying, I'm going to give you a very different way you could play the exact same game as a warrior as you can as a mage, and you will have a very different experience of that, even though the story will fundamentally be the same, everything around the edges. So I think I do like a story which gives me a kind of good moral kind of decision to make, and particularly those kind of Witcher 3 kind of almost paradoxes where there's two bad options, and because I do like that, those kind of Hobson choices sort of things where I'm always on board with that as a game, which is forcing me into making kind of tough decisions, like you can either save this person or that person, rather than just everything being evil or everything being good kind of thing. So I do like that, but then it has to have consequences. So if you kill off somebody, or you're really horrible to somebody, if they're still following you around and it makes no difference to the narrative of the game, then what's the point of it? I like the fact that by generally an evil playthrough, as Dale would call it, you're making it harder for yourself, because you tend to be like, you're not being a very nice person. You tend to go solo. You're probably killing off. You're rushing in combat. Guns blazing to everything. So I like that works. I like that option exists to kind of have people. But if you're forcing me into one lane, I'm going to lose interest.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of Dragon Age of Elgard. Straight away.
Yeah, well, exactly.
You could say whatever you wanted and play the game however you wanted. That you just were literally going to be experiencing the story in a very subpar way, and the illusion of choice was just so jarring, wasn't it? Versus again in BioWare's own stable, Mass Effect, for example, with the Renegade playthrough, especially at the end of Mass Effect 3, if you had renegaded all the way through and you had zero preparation because you basically pissed off everyone, you fucked it all up, and you played as a selfish twat, like you had real consequences to that, and it was just almost, it was baffling, really, absolutely baffling. Obviously, there's wider context surrounding why Valve end up that way, but that's a great example of a game which does exactly that, where you just feel like you're kind of a passenger floating through a shoddily created narrative, with kind of the sole redeeming feature being, I love this world, I love this universe, so I want to kind of hope that there's an element that saves it from itself. And we got to the end, we both kind of said to each other, well, that was a bit of almost a waste of time. That could have been a boilerplate game done by anybody that we'd have played on Game Pass, for that was all right, but forgotten about it, never played it again.
Yeah, and again, it was the writing there. I mean, look, I didn't like the way it looked visually either, but it was the writing which was so far beneath the previous 3 Dragon Age games, which was just really surprising, because that's the thing that those games, that company does best. So suddenly, yeah, kind of throw that out the window. And there was flashes of it there. The necromancer guy, I really liked his kind of existentialism kind of story that he went down. He was easily the best kind of character. I really liked that one. So there was flashes of it in there.
Yeah.
But then there was, like, again, half the plot dedicated to the Night Guard, or whatever the fuck those, is it the Night Guard? What's the main warrior called? Not the Veil Guard.
The Grey Wardens.
The Grey Wardens, that's it.
Boring.
They're just so boring, and
very socks on, aren't they?
Yeah, and just both the mage characters. I liked Harding, and I liked the passover from the previous games, but it was just like these characters were just so pure, like so 100% good. Everyone around you, it wasn't just that you could only play almost as Paragon. Everybody around you was Paragon. There was no darkness in it whatsoever. Nobody in your squad was a bastard at all.
No,
they were just like the nicest set of people, ever assembled in the world. It was like an American sitcom or something.
Disney, it was very Disney, as we were kind of saying at the time.
Yeah, very, very Disney, very Disney. Yeah,
I guess kind of a couple of things that I kind of noted down that work fairly well. There's always, I think, nowadays when you're playing a game, unless it's sort of you're inserted into it as a kind of a demigod like you are in Bethesda offerings, that semblance of some sort of mystery to begin with is obviously the common pastiche, but it's something which kind of works very well. Like, back in the day, you had like a Halo where you kind of you arrive as a super soldier and you just fuck everything up straight away. Absolutely, the story's kind of it's cool, but at the same time you are just kind of ripped effectively. But that kind of slow revelation is always quite nice. But I suppose the notion of there being one big secret can always set up the narrative to fail as well. So it's got to be handled fairly well. And unexpected beats, I think, work best. So I always think about this. Red Dead Redemption 2 and how that was written, and you've also kind of gone there with Arthur Morgan being your thing on the video today, because Arthur Morgan's demise, sorry if that's a spoiler, but it has been 7 or 8 years, so I mean
10, I think.
How you always felt when you went through it that he was surely not going to die. Like, you kind of, when he started coughing, all this sort of shit. Like, I remember particularly when I was playing those missions with Native American characters, that I was fully expecting some sort of miracle cure from an encamped witch doctor or something to show up, and that to occur. And him actually dying was quite something within that game, because you started to really sort of buy into the character and buy into that kind of story, and that's kind of what I guess worked for me about that one. And the other thing I think you kind of touched on as well, the right mind story and touches that reflect the impact that you've had on the world are always really important to me. If I again think of the Elder Scrolls series, when you're the fucking Archmage And then you start
Yeah.
in the Fighters Guild, and they're like, "Oh, shut up, runts!" And I'm the fucking Archmage. I'm the speaker of the Black Hand.
Yeah, he's like, why do they know what I'm doing in my spare time? Yeah,
I've finished the story. I'm the hero of Cyrodiil, and here I'm being made to go out and kill some rats. Obviously I know that's kind of how the game has to be, but I appreciate throughout the story if things do change, and also if kind of characters' demeanors towards you depend on how your deeds have kind of gone.
Yeah, and to be fair, one of the few flaws with Baldur's Gate 3 is that not on multiple playthroughs when you kind of learn it, but on the first playthrough, there's a pretty major decision early on when you have to go two ways to get to Act 2. You have to go either through the Underdark or you have to go over the mountain pass. But if you choose either one of those ways, which obviously is the most narrative sense, it's like you'd either choose one or the other as a group, and you do it. If you just do one, you're then massively underleveled for Act 2. So the game, particularly when you first do it, you end up, and because a lot of us are completionists, you end up doing both routes, which makes no narrative sense whatsoever. But you tropes all the way back through and do the other route as well, just so that you're then actually at the right level to not get absolutely slaughtered come Act 2. And that sometimes kind of like kind of irks me a little bit. And that I suppose that the other thing is that near we joke about it before, that lack of sense of time, so in The Witcher, Geralt has to complete this quest ASAP, but he can wander off for days chasing monsters, and again, so but then it's a balance, isn't it? Because Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, certainly that I felt the last third of that game just pushed me through without giving me, and I actually wanted a break. I was like, how can I was like, I'm actually I found my last battle really tricky because I wasn't quite ready. I knew it was a point of no return, but when it said point of no return, I didn't realize it was going to lock me into like a 30-hour, end game scenario where I could never go off. And over level or anything like that. So, I just it is a balance. So, we were going to talk about game endings. So I've got a few. I'd be interested if yours are the same as mine here. But what game endings have really kind of stayed with you in terms of when you've put that down, narratively speaking, I'm meaning, and you thought, fucking hell, that's
I don't know why. I honestly don't know why, PJ. It's a very kind of, it's not a niche game, but it's a game that definitely, for whatever reason, stayed with me a lot. It's the BioShock Infinite ending. I don't know if have you played that.
Is Infinite the third one?
Yes.
Yeah, the one with with Elizabeth,
the bait and switch. Where I am Comstock.
Yeah, it's quite tragic.
All the little girls are drowning him. Like I've got goosebumps saying that now. Like
that was a classic game where the narrative was exceptional, and the unlike the first two Bioware, it was like the reverse of the first two Biowares. I thought the combat or mechanics, whatever you want to call it, were terrible in that. It drove me mad.
You were on rails all the time, like railing around.
But the story, I agree, was really good.
It was so good. The first one actually was also very, very good because of, obviously I love Armin Shimmerman, who played Andrew Ryan, his Quark in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The Would You Kindly revelation was really cool, but then it was let down by the fact you could kill him really easily. That bait and switch is one that always sort of comes to me in a lot of ways. You've got to mention Cyberpunk here, really, in a lot, don't you? There's no sort of real because there's such a multitude of endings, and in some you kind of in some games you don't really care about the ending. It's all about the journey, and it can be about the world. So Tez, Fallout, Bethesda, but in others you do really fucking care. And something like Cyberpunk, for example, I want to go back and redo it to get the ending that I actually wanted. It felt kind of truest to the way that I'd played the character, how I'd played V, and the way that suited me was the one where Johnny takes your body and you just die. That was kind of I don't know whether that was the true ending in lots of ways. There's one where you went off with kind of what her name was, your girlfriend. There's another one where you give your body up to Arasoka, I think it was. But that one felt truest to me, and I kind of played it through several times to kind of make the ending fit the way I played the game. And that's
so. What was that? What was that ending to you?
The one where Johnny, where you give up your body to Johnny and you die.
Oh yeah. I think that's the one. Yeah, kind of. Chef talks about. So I've not done that ending. I've got Cyberpunk on my list. In terms of a game that I thought the ending was absolutely fantastic for. So I played that through twice, and when I've only, I don't know, I've cried twice at a game. I don't know if you've ever cried at a game. So one of them was Cyberpunk, which is the last, and that was when I played through. It was the DLC end, and it kind of ended with me. I woke up. You're in a coma. And you kind of wake up and lots of future has passed. Everyone's moved on, and then you kind of shave your head. You come out with, after that thing, and you just kind of start with a new identity. And I just found it was so nihilistic, but also so on point with the way that I'd played that particular run. It just felt so perfect that I just, it was like, that is the perfect ending to the story that I've just kind of played. And I didn't really want to kind of fuck with it by kind of going back and doing it again, because I'm like that. I don't even know. The thing is, because there's so many different ends. I don't even know how I got that end, really. So
the only other two endings that I really kind of have in my mind are the end. So in terms of crying into the game, The Witcher 3. So I played it just full on Paragon, did the nicest things I could possibly be. Nilfgaard won the war. I vaguely remember. You had a hug with Ciri and had this really nice sort of conversation, and then there's at the end of this, we'll meet again or something like that. And I because I think I was ill at that time as well. I just was recovering from being fairly ill, so I poured a lot of my sort of my spare time into kind of emotionally investing in that game, and played everything. I did absolutely fucking everything on that game just before DLCs were out, and which I did go back and play them actually, but it felt a bit sort of like a bit of an add-on, like when you watch a show it's been cancelled and it gets resurrected, thinking of Arrested Development or something like that. But I remember the kind of the end of that game. I felt like it felt like a real sort of emotional release in lots of ways. That I just loved that game so fucking much, and the ending was just incredible. And I don't know.
It's a great end. Yeah,
I was gonna say God of War Ragnarok as well, and I've got to just throw that in there because I'm sure that's on your list.
Yeah, very, very good. Very good God of War. Probably not. I don't know. I think I was slightly, I wouldn't say I was disappointed, but I felt it was like, that was the end. The end of that was like more of a nod of like, yeah, okay, done that. Very good. Yeah, very good.
I'll take it.
The ones we've not, the other game I've cried out, we've not mentioned, is The Last of Us. Especially part 2. And we've chatted before about that ending to the game with a character's fight. Man. And I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that in a game, where that was probably the closest I felt to being in like some form of kind of virtual simulator, living an alternate life. I just found it so difficult to kind of get through. And it was just difficult because the job that they'd done with those characters was so exceptional. Absolutely. That I just felt like I didn't feel I was those characters. You have in some games you're like,
Henry,
you become the character. Whereas I never felt that, mainly because we're probably two young women. But I certainly felt that like I was kind of controlling them from the sideline sort of thing, and I was very, very invested in that. And that was really good. When Red Dead 2 had the sorry, carry on.
I was going to say when Abby and Ellie slug it out.
Yeah. So
I actually, I lost my. I've kind of had a game. When the game fail, when you have like a fail screen, I got that because I didn't want to fight her. Like I physically couldn't bring myself to do it, and I was hoping that there'd be like an alternative where that I didn't have to do it, and the game would.
And it just goes on so long. It's just like make it end. No, very, 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 very difficult. I think I remember you telling me about that before.
I can't believe I didn't think about The Last of Us when I was mentioning, having those sort of unusual beats, because I mean, with the TV series, right? They told the viewers, I have no interest in watching the TV series at all, but I know they've told the viewers that why Abby did it really, really early.
Exactly.
And that's the
They should tell you right at the
stupidest
start,
decision you could ever
which was
do.
very odd. Really odd that I don't understand their narrative decision for that. Obviously, they've changed a lot of the characters around quite significantly, but the bit where Joel is initially killed in The Last of Us Part 2, you're just like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
and then you end up controlling Ellie and then Abby again. For him to, and I know, a lot of people obviously kind of weren't happy with those kind of choices, but I played them kind of back to back pretty much, and for me it was just extremely powerful. So the other two games I just really wanted to mention. So you mentioned kind of Red Dead 2 already. So that had the best end, but then the worst epilogue. So it completely muffed it. The game should have ended when Arthur died. That was the end of that journey. Like I said, I didn't expect him to die. I was like, oh my god, he's dead. But the last thing I want to do when the character I've spent 100 hours controlling is dead is play some other rando building a farm for 20 hours.
John Marsden.
What on earth were they doing?
Well, because it's Red Dead. He's the protagonist of Red Dead 1, I guess. So it's kind of Red Dead 2 is the prequel of Red Dead 1. But I mean, that who remembered that, honestly? Like, it's very sort of like, oh.
Very, very odd. And finally, the other one on a much more upbeat level, probably my favorite end to a game ever, is Mass Effect 2. That I just absolutely love. Just the whole action scene that they do towards the end of it. The fact that a certain a character will die depending on the choices that you make. A character will be saved, obviously, who you've romanced. The fact that whole narrative can go in several different directions, and it's really fun. It's really impactful. And when I played that, I was like, "Oh my god, that's amazing!"
I say to everyone, because I downloaded the phone. You had to something on your phone to get the extra 5% or whatever it was. So I did
unbelievable.
that to make sure I could. I just couldn't figure, because I had one where I think the first bit you're doing something in vents or something like that, and Legion died. I had a save at that when I got to 95%. I was thinking, well, that'll be enough. That'll save everyone. And Legion died earlier on. Who was the what they're called now? The whatever, the kind of mechanical, look like droids in Star Wars Episode 1.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, I can't have this. So I reloaded, downloaded the thing on the phone. I'm sure it was something on the phone you had to do. Played the mini game, whatever it was, to make sure I got 100% and linked my sort of EA thing to, oh my god, just to make sure everyone survived. That was it. There's only I think it's Mass Effect 1 you had to choose between Caden and Ashley. That was the only time I think that I can remember in Mass Effect you had to choose one person to die.
Yes. So, but those would be the ones I would mention.
Yeah, I think they are very important in a lot of games. Some I think that some endings that I don't really kind of care about, to be honest. It can be a lot about the journey,
Some is just relief. It's just like, oh my god, thank God. To be fair, you've not got to it yet. I think Claire Obscure 33 does exactly what Red Dead 2 does, whereas the ending to the story is magnificent. And then it's got the worst fucking epilogue in the world. And it's just like, what have you done? Why have you given me this epilogue?
I'm not playing. I already know from the descriptions, and I apologize if people are playing it and enjoying it. I already know that it was not going to suit me from what you've been saying in the group. There's no fucking way I'm sitting there for...
And I'd play it again and I'd do the story. And if I played Red Dead 2 again, I'd stop as soon as Arthur died and I'd put it down at that point. I would never play that epilogue again. So... but yeah, games like, I know we were going to mention in terms of kind of how kind of side quests kind of integrate a story, and Red Dead 2 is always a brilliant example of that, because the main plot is probably the least interesting until you get to that kind of main Arthur's character development is very important, but so much of that character development comes through his side quests and some of the kind of characters. I've got a mate who's played Red Dead 2 for over 250 hours. and never even got half through the plot. He just got to a point in the game where he could be self-sufficient and then treated it like The Sims and just lived off the fat of the land, like hunting and gambling, and just did that for weeks upon weeks on end.
It can happen though. I mean, yeah, side quests, like the skinny on that is there's massive importance to me attached to them being good in a Japanese RPG context. Thinking of Yakuza, and I'm sure you probably had this with Final Fantasy, voiced. That's always very important to me. Because it doesn't give the impression that it's just something that they've just thought, oh fuck it, keep those idiots busy, and just not fucking fetch quests. They're the worst. If I'm on MMORPGs, if I God forbid boot up World of Warcraft again, then I'm going to know that okay, there are going to be some bits. Go and fetch me 10 dragon's eggs from the fields of Corvushark. Fine, whatever. But the importance of side quests, I think The Witcher 3 was kind of, I think, the watershed for a lot of this, which kind of shocked a lot of the industry into actually bothering to write side quests which were functioning as a story within the story, which kind of augmented the richness of the world. I don't think we see too many games now where oh god Assassin's Creed where side quests are neglected too much, because they are so important in terms of just enriching your experience in a game.
They are, and I think the AC and Final Fantasy games just kind of throw everything at you. Less is more, blah blah blah. What's frustrating about those games is how much gold there is in amongst kind of all the shit. But I think top-down RPGs, Divinity 2, Baldur's, Wasteland 3, I think it's a strength of that genre in particular, as they're quite literary anyway. So there's quite a lot of kind of good writing that they can kind of get out of their side quests. And I kind of sometimes you get the impression like, well, you've obviously you give them that to that team in the office sort of thing, and they've worked on that quest, and it's a whole game in itself, kind of almost, but built within the main mechanics of the game, and that's when it works very well. Rather than, because the thing about fetch quests or those kind of is that it's so rarely done well. So what you invariably get is this scenario whereby I either have to spend 2 hours traipsing across the plains to find 10 mushrooms, or and I've got no idea where they are. They could be in the weirdest possible positions. Or am I just going to look it up to get the reward at the end of it? Because whereas you would never look up how to complete a side quest in The Witcher 3 because it's so narrative driven. You're into the story and sort of stuff. You might look up if you might get stuck on a monster and you're not very good or something, but you wouldn't say, oh, should I pick A or should I pick B or should I pick C? It's just like fucking make the decision based on how you're playing that character. Whereas, I just think all those kind of fetch related quests, they're just, nobody, I can't believe anyone enjoys that. So they're forcing you into either aimlessly wandering, which is losing the impact of the game and breaking your immersion, or just looking up to find where everything is just so you can put that tick in the box and move on.
Those are, I think the more sort of experience you get with games, the more you see those quests coming a lot of the time. And if you're a paddy level completionist, you see them and think, okay, these are something I'm going to tick off my to-do list and just get them done in order to work towards my completion. For others like me and probably you as well, these are kind of quests where you just think, I know exactly what the fabric of this quest is, which is literally just to give me a bit of busy work effectively if it comes in a game. And I think loads of games are culpable of giving you this sort of quest, but it doesn't happen as much. So I mean, it does happen an awful lot.
No.
All right. So should we
what about let's skip to character growth, I think, because that's kind of more where we're kind of going. We mentioned before that we like a speaking character, but do you like one who kind of changes with the plot and that kind of your decisions? We know we like that kind of decision making, but you mean as in like Henry in KCD, you start at the bottom and you have to kind of get to the top, or do you kind of like just that acceptance that no, you are God, in God of War you are literally a god, right away from the outset?
I mean, I think it depends, because God of War, I think, is a very sort of specific case, isn't it? Where the story is written so well. I do think that in terms of the progression of the narrative, progression of the story, it is sort of I don't know. I feel like I connect a bit more. I loved kind of playing God of War. I love Kratos as a character, right? But equally, it kind of felt like it you didn't really go to you went on a journey emotionally in some ways with Kratos. We didn't go on a journey in terms of the character's overall development into what he became. And maybe with Arthur Morgan, you might say the same thing. What I loved about KCD2, which is why it is sort of my goat game across both games, it is that sort of progression, I guess. Even though, yeah, okay, eventually you find out, spoiler from KCD1, that Henry is a boss of an ability. He does come from being an essentially unskilled character that you put a fuckload of hours into building those skills and inhabiting the character of Henry and deciding, okay, I'm going to spend a whole evening of gaming's time fucking making marigold potions. I'm going to spend an evening of gaming time walking from one end to the other of the Trotsky map, fully over encumbered, because I know that then his strength is going to grow. And I think that is what's really important to me about character growth. It's buying into the individual. Sometimes it can be. I don't mind, Geralt, for example. I don't mind Kratos. They were great. They were really interesting characters to inhabit and see how they would deal with things. But I think kind of what talking to you guys over the course of the last few pods has shown me actually is that I lean into the role playing element of games an awful lot. And this is why I kind of quite like D&D, even though I never kind of quite got on board with, a party which lasted a long time. But I really like kind of feeling like you are that character. And I when I was sad, this is very very sad. But when I kind of said to my other half I was going to go and play KCD, I was like, I'm going to go and be Henry for a bit. It sounds really shit, but that's kind of how I kind of reflect on that.
Yeah, no, I get that, and obviously Henry's a kind of great example of that. His growth is part of the challenge and indeed the frustration at times, kind of the game. And I think that's why a lot of RPGs have that kind of very similar narrative of a kind of a lost hero, a forgotten hero, somebody who's doesn't know where they are or doesn't know how to do things, because then it fits with the narrative that you get more powerful as you regain your powers and your memories, and you can build up and level up. So it's you'll find a lot of games where you're thrust in as quite a powerful person to begin with. It can get a little bit boring. You will eventually end up getting far too kind of overpowered for the kind of latter half of the game.
Yeah.
What just very quickly on what I will say on A Witcher. So I know you've not kind of replayed it, but Dale Chef replays it quite a lot, as do I do. So I always play, when I replay it, I always play on New Game Plus, which Dale never does, which I find baffling. And I've had this conversation with him. It never sat with me that Geralt is so weak at the start and so powerful at the end of that journey. He's been a Witcher for fucking years. At the absolute peak of his powers, why has he forgotten half his bloody skills until he enters Novigrad? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So for me, playing on New Game Plus, where you've got all your weapons, all your skills, everything unlocked right at the beginning of the game, makes so much more sense. And you just whack the difficulty up. And then for me, I think that's one of the reasons I replayed it. It's the only game where it's got better playing it on a New Game Plus kind of second run for me, because it just makes so much more sense narratively. Because it's not even mentioned. It's not even like with Gareth. He doesn't. I know there's a slight amnesia issue, but that only seems to be related to who he's shagging. It doesn't actually seem to be related to any of his skills. Why can't he whirl his sword until like 15 hours through the game? So I do like that. I like that option exists, that you can kind of change that. So
yeah. And so outside of just one character, when you've got multiple characters, so the games that we love, I've not done the Baldur's Gate to level you have. I've not done gosh, what's the other one? The other one was kind of a bit D&D, Divine.
yeah, Divinity.
Yeah, I've not done that. But obviously, on DAI, Clair Obscur we're playing. Like, how does that go for you? I feel like I want to give all of the characters an equal sort of
I level up
equal
equally.
feeling.
I did this, in Clair Obscure, and I know people who have just like put like have Mayao on like level 200, and then like Luna on like level 40, or like the equivalent in terms of like the and the way they assign the Lumina points and sort of stuff. So you've got one massively overpowered character, and then some you barely use, and then obviously some games differ. So in Baldur's Gate, everyone levels up even if they're not in the party, whereas in some games, so the experience is split out. Whereas in some games, like Clair Obscure, you only level up if you're physically within the party. So you have to kind of keep rotating them in order to keep them at the kind of same level. So I think that's a different challenge when you've got those kind of two approaches. I ultimately, again, we're coming back to narrative. I like taking somebody in. We both love Dorian of Dragon Age Inquisition, not because he's great, but he's just fun to be around, rather than that humorless sorceress who was clearly more powerful, Vivian or something, was it? So bored now of religious piety, when I can get on board with a sarcastic gay outcast with daddy issues. It's like that's what I want.
Adding to this one, doesn't it, of the Dragon Age Velgar, when he fucking showed up for like 2 minutes, and then you're like,
oh my god, don't ruin this. Oh, don't remind me. And who's that wench from Dragon Age 2? Oh my god, those little
Cassandra?
Honestly, that game.
No.
It was the one from, it was the Morrigan, that was it.
Wench.
No, actually, I didn't mean Morrigan. Sorry, not Morrigan. Morrigan was actually one of the few things. It was the pirate girl from Dragon Age 2.
Oh, good, Leilani.
Yeah, who was just wearing a wench's outfit and organizing like a kind of combat arena. And that was it. And she would just say things in a like fake British accent, like, "Oh, look at you! You fancy a go, don't you, love?" And it's like, what? Who wrote this? No,
outsource it's the work experience, kid.
Awful. So let's touch briefly on difficulty setting, just because I want to rib you for this. Obviously you did complete Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, probably the only even remotely Souls-like game that you can claim that you've completed. Why do you think devs make that decision sometimes to not have that difficulty setting?
I think it's really, really interesting in lots of ways. I think that the key sort of element of it is that sometimes they give you the choice, right? They even state it in the blurb, if you've got an option, the slider, it'll be like, this is the way the game is meant to be experienced. And there's obviously the story mode above, and then a few kind of more below, which basically make your enemies into a bullet sponge. I think the main reason they kind of give you that decision is so you can tailor it to who you are as a person. I know, look, I'm not saying this is a bad thing at all. There's lots of kind of inclusivity stuff that you get now, so that quick time events automatically complete and things like that. I've got busted thumbs from football injuries many years ago, so if I have to mash a button for a long time, I actually can't. I physically can't do it. So
Street Fighter 2,
I couldn't do that. But like, even when you get like you get quick time events in some games, Greedfall comes to mind, where you had to mash a button to stop something from happening. I had the autocomplete on because I physically, and Last of Us 2 actually, where you had those little events where you had to do something. I swapped them from mash to hold, which I could do. And I think that some of it is kind of, I guess, trust in the players, one angle. So trust in the player and not giving up on the game and following it through. Another angle is that kind of inclusivity sort of thing. Souls-like games, I don't know whether you have a difficulty setting. I've got absolutely no idea. I know
you don't.
Pi does, but
no, that's the whole point. You don't know. Liza P doesn't have difficulty. It does now, but they've literally just put that in.
Is it just because they're trying? Is it just because like they're obviously it's kind of a mark of skill in some ways, and in other ways it's kind of like them being like, this is what you get. Just
I think it's about like I've come around to this. I was certainly on your camp initially, that like have an easier difficulty setting to let me. But I think it forces you into a corner, and if the game's good enough, it means that I'm getting better at it, and I find it more satisfying mastering it. If there is a easier difficulty option, I will almost invariably, eventually, if I'm stuck, just kind of succumb to it, even if it's just for like a little test, just to kind of see what it was kind of like to kind of get through that. And there are some games like the recent games we played about the Midnight game, South of Midnight, that had like you could choose to even skip the entire kind of combat section and stuff. But I get it because that's a more narrative driven game. But the Souls games are ultimately combat driven games. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is quite a rare example of a game with no difficulty setting, which is quite narrative driven, which is one of the reasons why it can be it's obviously kind of so difficult to kind of some people. But yeah, the Souls games, I just think you do. And the other thing about the Souls games is that the difficulty curve is early on. It's always the first 5 hours are always the hardest, pretty much always, with the exception of Sekiro. Every other game, the hardest boss, the hardest levels are right at the beginning because you don't know what you're doing. You're underpowered to shit at that point. You haven't unlocked any good weapons or skills, so all you've got is your reflexes essentially, and that can be hard as you get older. I feel my age. When the final boss on the epilogue of Clair Obscur, there's one move that he does. I physically, it wasn't a get good or timing. I physically couldn't. I wasn't fast enough to speed. I could not move my thumb or finger or anything. I tried everything. I moved the whole controller just to do it. You basically have to press a button, just button bash for like 10 seconds for one particular move. And I physically cannot move my digits fast enough. And I felt like I was really judged for an age thing. I was like, oh my God, I'm sure 20-year-old me could have done that. But now I'm in my 40s. I watched a documentary the other day when I went to the Sheffield Film Festival about factory working in China, and amongst many other things that I won't go into in terms of kind of capitalism versus exploitation and stuff, where there was this line where the factory manager was just like, oh, we have different kind of stages of the factory depending on, and it's split entirely by age. So people who are like 18 to 25 who have really fast fingers and can get there on all the really complex sort of stuff because they can just, their fingers just work so much faster. Their eye-hand coordination is so much better. And then as you go through all the ages, and then it was like, oh, and when you hit 45, which is the age I just turned this year, it's like, oh, when you hit 45, no, that's it. You can't work in a factory anymore. That's it. Not that I would want to, but it was just like, it's like you do not have the hand-eye coordination good enough at that age. And that then on top of the ending of Clair Obscur, which I did finally complete, albeit with a slight fudge, but was just like, oh, God,
getting your daughters to do the quick time stuff.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like I can't.
Right, hold this. When this happens, just hit that button as fast as you can. Your youthfulness will help Daddy complete this. For some reason, I'm not sure why. I've lost sight of it now.
But I don't think I wouldn't call now for difficulty settings to come into games, because I think it's just that's the decision. They live and die by that decision at the end of the day. The Souls games are massively popular. Would they have been as popular if they'd put in story modes right from the start? I doubt it, because to be honest, it's the combat which makes those games good, not the story anyway.
Yeah. So I don't play every game on story mode, contrary to your thinking process. I think there's definitely an element that I know that I could play these games. It's Souls-like games on kind of the general testing, right? It's just the time that I've got is very different now to how it was 10, 15 years ago when I could have sat there and done that. And I don't have that now, and the game time feels very precious, and I like to feel like there's a bit of a sense of progression with what I'm doing every night, if that makes sense, unless I'm on KCD2 and I'm selling my inventory.
Yeah, well, yeah, Kingdom Come to is one of the biggest grinding games, certainly the first half, you're ever likely to encounter. But the argument I always use to people who maybe struggle with Souls games is, for that exact reason that you've just said, is that like there's no frills, there's no stuff around the edges with most Souls games. It's combat after combat after combat. So the time that you would spend in lots of those other games invariably kind of grinding in different ways, or going off doing fetch quests or parkour quests, and you're like, there's none of that. It's just like beat this boss, beat this boss, beat this boss, in a kind of stream of kind of interconnecting kind of level designs. And even though it might take you 10, 20 times to kind of beat a boss, in reality, It's not a long period of time.
I know, but it's the repetition
spent on
there.
it.
It's the repetition thereof. You know, it doesn't feel like it. I know it feels like there's a sense of kind of improvement about that, right? Did you play back in the
How's it any? But you
long
like
part?
roguelites. How is it any different from Hades? You've played Hades. Hades is hard.
Every run is not the same. Whereas if you're fighting the same boss again, it's the same, right? And
Yeah, but you're learning how to
but equally, you know that you can do it. It's
and
just
you're
the
getting
fact
closer.
that
You're getting closer each time.
that annoys me. That I just be like, well, I could do it, but fuck it. It's like Phoenix Rising, that fucking shooting the arrow through the hoops. It's the same to me.
It's not the same. I'm not.
Reminds me of Ico. And did you ever play Ico or Shadow of the Colossus?
I did play
Back in
Shadow
the
of the
day?
Colossus. Yeah, that
And
was a nightmare.
that's kind of what this is all. That's what kind of all the Souls games. Feels like the forefather of those. It was very similar, and that was the first time I encountered them, and it was the same sort of feeling to me. Where I felt like, oh well,
I hear you. I think the early Souls
do this. I just
the
don't
early
want to do
Souls
this.
games. I think are more like that. I think the fact that you've obviously not gone back and played any of the more modern ones are better at doing that. They make it. They give you more ways to to kind of beat it and to kind of combat that sort of stuff. They haven't changed a difficulty setting, but they have given you a lot more tools in your armory, as it were, to say, well, okay, you can just play as a cowardly mage if you really want to. Go on, we'll let you do that.
Okay,
but
it's like that threshold thing that you spoke about earlier on, that you can, like, you get to a point in some games, so KCD or whatever, where you think, okay, right, I can't do this at the moment. I'm just going to fuck off, kill lots of mobs for a while, do a couple of quests, power up to either kind of the level I need to be at, or even above the level I need to be at, be overpowered, and I can just do this particular encounter. I'm done. There's a way out of it, which doesn't involve kind of just endlessly doing the same thing over and over again. So that's the turn off for me, when it's kind of like, oh, there's no recourse other than just grinding away, because it is grinding, and it's grinding with variety versus grinding with repetition. I just don't like the latter, basically.
Fair enough. I suppose that brings us to one of our kind of final questions in terms of that kind of where you become kind of overpowered in games, if that kind of pacing kind of issue is off, whereby you can. But that's what I get. I get frustrated if I become overpowered too early, because then I just find it repetitive. Because I'm like, I've almost invariably found a way that I can beat most people usually through a particular move. We all have, this spell, this particular special move is really suited to how we play, and so we kind of use it. And I don't think there's enough games which are harder at the back end rather than at the beginning. Yeah. One of the only one which kind of springs to mind in terms of was just so good at evolving, Randy, and I can't believe more games don't do this. Was that was the Lord of the Rings game?
With the enemies, with the
with the enemies would learn your move patterns.
Nemesis.
And I remember doing that, playing that like 5-6 years ago, and thinking, oh my god, this is unbelievable that I can and they even talk to you and taunt you. They were really funny, these orcs with British accents and stuff. Just like, no, I've seen this move before. It's like, I know what you're going to do, and you had to then learn different ways and stuff. But why? What happened? Why didn't more games ever
fun facts?
Fun
facts that is patented by that company, and they basically stopped making games now, and the holding company owns the patents for that particular way to play a game.
Wow!
And they so you can Google it, and it's on. I saw it on Kotaku about it a little while ago. I think it was maybe Polygon, and
that's so disappointing. That was so good.
It's a specific mechanic which effectively they own, and that it's not kind of it. I'm surprised there's no workaround.
Can't anyone else invent it, or is it just the case of that no one else is even allowed to?
I think it's because the similarity is always going to be something that people sue for, effectively. But I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
That's because that's very funny, because genuinely games are pretty much the most plagiarized medium on the planet.
I think it's that particular element of it where they can relate to the player, especially with the rise of AI now. Like, there's so many things they could possibly do. I'm sure they'll find a way to circumvent it very soon. But that particular mechanic is actually intellectual property, incredibly. I think there definitely are maybe some like Souls likes where it never really happens. There's not a way to get overpowered, but I do feel like every game reaches what you might call a saturation point at some kind of juncture in the gameplay when thinking about Oblivion when you're running around. Oblivion's a bit different actually because your enemies level up with you. Thinking about the Fallout where you're running around with like ridiculous weaponry. And then if you get the moment you get back to the story after doing everything else, you're like, well, I'm one-shotting everything, and that feels kind of fundamentally unsatisfying. And maybe PJ, maybe this is like the frontier of games where they haven't quite figured out how to make it work. Like the writing's always great. I don't know if it's going to be this way in Clair Obscur. I did remember in Dragon Age Inquisition, like this mixture of kind of getting overgeared, overpowered, and also figuring out the mechanics of how it works and what works best in terms of beating whatever's in front of you, having the optimal team or figuring out, depending on per encounter, how to be versatile in terms of calibrating the team you've got with you or your own character if it's a single character game. You can kind of key into that and figure it out fairly early on, I feel, because I think by then developers, again, neither of us developers, but thinking from their perspective, they may be thinking, well, okay, you've got this far, so you're fully in the pocket of the game. Maybe now it's just about the story rather than the progression. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there are lots of games, we're talking about Ghost of Tsushima, Zelda, are kind of examples of games whereby you generally you hit a point and you're like, okay, I'm playing this now because I'm invested in a character, I'm invested in a story, but it can get tiresome because you're not doing anything new to what can often be quite long-winded kind of combat or kind of puzzle sort of sections. It's very rare that a game, I think, challenges you that kind of equal amount all the way through. I played Black Myth Wukong recently, but Paddy played as well. I would have brought up with him, and that was a good example of one, to be fair, where all the way through it challenged me to the right level, and it had a really and it made sense with the story as well, which is given we're kind of on that kind of narrative kind of side of it as well. But that's rare. Like most of the games, you're just like, okay, I'm on autopilot now, and you almost may as well. There's the amount of games where I like the story, but where I will put it down to story mode. Just I have done that, not to claim that you're the only person who's ever done that. But where I've done that invariably isn't actually where I've got stuck, but it's where I'm just finding the combat boring, and I'm just like, I want to have the end of this story. Yeah, so I'm just going to put it right down. Like, I actually did that with The Last of Us, just because I just found the story so much more interesting than any of the combat. I was like, I'm in it for the story. It's like I don't want to be stuck on levels because I need to find out what happens next. I'm so engaged in the next plot of a narrative that I played the second half of that game on the easiest difficulty setting, just because that was the quickest way to keep progressing the kind of narrative through. I obviously could have completed it harder, but I was like, well, why? I don't. And also, a game like that, it feels like it's a strange thing to say because dying is such a fundamental part of computer games. But in games like that, if I felt that every time I died, it broke my immersion. I'm like, well, I'm dead. This doesn't make any sense, that narrative. Whereas in that fantasy regeneration kind of setting, I'm more okay with the fact that I can die and kind of be brought back to life or load up an old save. Whereas if it's like, I was like, well, Ellie's dead. I was like, and she's dead again, and she's dead again. So I'm just going to keep her alive by playing on story mode. So so I do get the case of that with a strong narrative.
Yeah, a lot of it's just horses for courses, I say, essentially. If it's a game that I'm really kind of enjoying, so Clair Obscur, obviously didn't have the chance of KCD, game I properly invested in, I would definitely kind of just play it on either the expedition mode or kind of the level it's meant to be played on, or difficulty above that. if it kind of feels a bit too easy. But if it's a game that's kind of a bit of a rebound game for me, then I'll play that on story mode, just kind of enjoy that sort of narrative. If it's kind of it gets to the level, which is maybe different from you, if I'm fighting a boss, right, and I just feel like I get to that point where it's just repetition, as of the Souls likes, my rejoinders of the Souls like I don't like them. That's when I whack it down to story mode and just think, yeah, okay, I want to get through this. Similar to you with Abby potentially or Ellie potentially. I was like, I wouldn't just progress the story now. Like, I know how to fight this boss. I could fight this boss. I could kill this boss. I could be here for 2 or 3 hours iterating on how I do this boss, and hopefully I get it all right at a certain point, or I just whack it on story mode, get out of the way, and then we progress. And that's the way that I kind of see the utility of story modes. Like if I'm kind of just dad mode, having a few beers on a night, and just want to kind of get through a game fairly quickly because I'm playing it as a filler, or if I'm playing a game where I'm like, yeah, all right, I've had enough. I just don't want to do this anymore. I just want to progress.
Yeah, I get that. I do get that. Yeah, I get that.
Well, I think we've definitely taken us to task, really. I think, yeah, an hour and 15 with just the two of us. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and just there's so much stuff, not even mentioned, so many great narratives, Disco Asylum, Wolfenstein: A New Order, amazing narrative games we've not even got into, that this kind of narrative doesn't always even have to mean the kind of script. It can be the entire aesthetic of a game. So there's kind of puzzle platform games like Death's Door, Unraveled, Limbo, where, Portal, where there's nothing in progression, but the world is so well crafted visually. Yeah. You're happy to just go with it. So yeah, a massive topic. But I'll be honest, the others, but let's be honest, Paddy and Nima would have slowed us down on this.
They would have, and we didn't even get into leveling skill trees and things like that. But to be honest, and I don't think beyond sitting here for another 2 or 3 hours, neither of us can. We've got work tomorrow of actual lives.
Yes, yeah, we do.
And we've gone into without.
It is quite warm, so yeah.
Yeah.
A great chat, mate. So yeah, over to you. But yeah, been a pleasure to spare time with you as always.
Thanks very much, PJ. If you enjoyed the pod, give us a follow. 0VER_Encumbered on the shit show. 0 not no. Over Encumbered pod on Bluesky, YouTube, TikTok. Enjoyed the pod. Do one or all of the following if you're so inclined. Follow us on socials. Give the pod a 5-star rating on Spotify, iTunes, whatever, or a like on YouTube if you're watching there, and subscribe too. Thanks so much, PJ. Thanks all. Back next week on Sunday, Monday. I'm not really too sure when. We're still in negotiations with the rest of our really unreliable twats of crew figuring out when we're going to do the fun pod of the summer run, which is going to be gunplay, blocking, parrying, all that defensive stuff. Stay mobile. We'll speak to you again very, very soon. I've got too much. Hello?
Hello?